Morning.
Morning.
1HQ, we are a brand agency, and we come to market with three main areas. One which is driven through research, insight and innovation. We also have packaging design and brand design, and product design. So we sort of have three very clear disciplines that we come to the market with. All of those are wrapped under what we call 1HQ, which stands for One Hard Question. And I think what we've tried to do within the business is our strategic focus is about delivering great brands, new innovation, entrepreneurial thinking, but it's through our process of ensuring that we ask the right question. 1HQ stands for One Hard Question. And we think that a lot of agencies in the past, and certainly in my history, we spend a lot of time looking at solutions and trying to find the solutions. But here we spend a lot more time making sure that the one hard question is asked or it's identified. And if you spend a lot of time making sure the questions are asked correctly and you identify which are the tough ones to answer, the answers usually flow pretty easily. So that's what we are as a business, a brand agency, and we deliver brand strategy and brand ideas through the medium of packaging, brand communications and product.
Taking a campaign such as Heinz tomato sauce, what was the hard question that you had to ask with that campaign?
Well, it was an interesting one. Tomato sauce was the problem they had it positioned all about tomato performance. And they had it all about, they were trying to position it about the performance of the tomato itself and how you could kind of bring that to life. When we started looking through their research, it was clear that the problem that they had was that the consumer saw tomato sauce as far away from natural as you can imagine. They were seeing it as the lubricant of fast food. And so everybody was kind of remembering tomato sauce from the kind of sauce left on the tray at McDonald's or Burger King, and seeing it as very bad, the lubricant of bad food for you. And so I suppose what we try to do with them is sort of take a look at that and understand how do you ask the question with, well, how do you bring out tomato performance? How do you think about it as a natural product? And how do you then develop what we call a brand heart around that? And it led into the positioning that we have of grown, not made. And so the positioning for it was to try and make it, to bring people's attention to the fact that it still is a grown product. There are so many that go into a bottle. They are one of the largest growers of tomatoes in the world. They're very proud of their kind of heritage in the growth of tomatoes. And it was important for us to sort of make sure that that came across to the consumer, and they saw it as being a grown product and not just a chemical in a bottle.
And I gather you feel they're kind of lessons that political parties can learn from that.
Yeah, I think that was probably referring to an article we wrote about what can the politicians learn from Heinz tomato sauce. And I think what the point we were trying to make from that was that Heinz tomato sauce had what we call a brand heart, which is a very, very clear, big idea that defines the personality and characteristics of that particular brand. And so grown, not made was our idea, the brand heart, that we felt had the campaignable strength to be stretched, whether it was into the product, whether it was into brand communications, advertising, and now you'll see it's pretty much on, I think it's worldwide, tomato sauce. And so I suppose what we were trying to say with that is that we were very clear on what it did, what it said on the bottle, and who it was aimed at. And I think with the article we wrote on the politicians, I think it became very clear that everybody was a little bit wishy-washy. Is it Labour? Is it Liberal? Is it Conservative? Is it Coalition? What is it? It is. And we just felt that neither of them really clearly emotionally connected with the consumer or the people, I suppose. And were very clear on what their position was. They didn't really look at the DNA of their message. It was all a lot of talk. It was all a lot of spin and ideas and what ifs and all this stuff. So we felt that it would be interesting to sort of associate it to Heinz, and who did have a very, very clear position. Design is frequently overlooked, but the art and the craft of design is a crucial part of developing a brand, and we know that here more than anything else, whether it's tomato sauce, whether it's Snuggle or Surf or Random's Nestle. You know, the big idea is critical, answering the hard question is critical, but being entrepreneurial and innovative is critical. But if that thing isn't designed properly or it doesn't look good, then it won't work.
And I think that takes us back to the Heinz tomato ketchup and politicians point, is that Heinz, that whole positioning, grown not made, is built on a product truth. 130 grams of tomatoes go into a 100 gram bottle. Now, you know, going back to your point about the Conservatives or any of the political parties, what was the product truth upon which these things were built? Where was that sort of, that real tangible thing that they were going to stride forward and do to make people's lives different, to live up to the vision that they were selling? And I think that they were wishy-washy about the vision because they really didn't have that tangible product truth.
Claire, tell me about branding in an age of recession and economic difficulties. Is there a danger that people will try to kind of reduce those budgets for branding and marketing and all of that?
I think it's in the face of adversity, and I think it's probably a time when people should be spending more on their brands and thinking, how do we come through this in the best possible light? The people who are going to be trading are going to be eroding their brand, and it's a question of saying, okay, how are you going to stay front of mind so when you come out the other side, you're the one who's going to be leading the way and people looking to you as that guiding light.
But does that message get through? Because it's obviously a very salient point, but finance directors don't always kind of buy into those things.
No, they don't. But I think what we're seeing is that people are having to take a more entrepreneurial approach to the way they're looking at things, and just kind of saying, taking a step back and saying, we can't necessarily do it the way we've always done it before. What's going to get us to the best outcomes, and what way do we need to get there, which is not necessarily how they've always done it. And I think that's going to be a big change in culture, and it needs to be a decision that's taken top down within the organisation rather than being given the responsibility of a marketing manager or a brand manager. So, yeah.
I think that, I mean, what's important there is I think that it's also a reflection on media fragmentation. I mean, we've all talked about media fragmentation until the cows come home, but we are in a period now, in quite a tough 5-year period, where the fragmentation of media will demand that the allocation of budgets is spent differently. It used to be all about broadcast advertising, and there's no question at all that broadcast advertising with a lot of big brands, it's still very, very important. But it's not the only medium to the consumer right now. There is all media full stop with the web, etc. But we also believe in what we do, which is what I think we're passionate about. The strategy we have at 1HQ is that we believe packaging and the package sitting on the shelf is going to have a lot more power. The P&G talked about it from the beginning of time. It's the last moment of truth. That truth of getting people to the store and then looking at the shelf and then am I going to buy that one or that one? What Claire's just said is going to be critical, because all of that push into there will have been diluted through all the various fragmentation. So at that point of purchase, your brand has got to stand out, and if brand owners don't recognise they've got to put as much rigour into the development of that than they do into broadcast, then they'd be crazy, because that's the bit that's going to talk about the product, it's going to differentiate them in the marketplace, it's going to drive ritualistic behaviour by ensuring people go back time and time again to that product, rather than sort of saying, oh well, I'll try that one next week or that one. You've got to drive ritualistic behaviour and make people far, far more brand loyal.
But I think it also has made us, I think, with clients' budgets, given what they're doing, how they're changing, is kind of looking inwards and saying, how can we be smarter with those budgets and how can we help them? So if they haven't got X million to spend above the line, then we're the kind of people that can help them with like new social media, thinking how they spend the 20s of thousands rather than the multiple millions that perhaps once they had. But not forgetting that that front face of the brand, i.e. the packaging or, you know, the route to market in store or whatever, you know, that point from getting out their car and actually getting to that till, that the right messages are being communicated. And I think, you know, where a lot of brands previously would have said, okay, we've got something, we're going to launch it, we're getting it to market, it's almost like not stopping there, and it's making sure, even though you've got a great idea, you know, are we checking that it's absolutely the right idea rather than just launching and expecting it to succeed? A lot more attention to detail in terms of the launch. Is it getting these messages across, and testing that rather than just expecting it automatically to win? There's a lot more diligence needed around ensuring it's the right solution for the brand rather than just expecting. The days where you can just launch something and it happens, I think, are few and far between.
A big question, if not necessarily a hard question, do you yourselves influence social mores, or do you follow them, do you think? Which comes first?
A real balance, actually, isn't it?
Well, it's a hard question.
Okay.
It's not.
That is a hard question.
That's not a big question. That is a hard question.
I would say that we're often identifying things that are at the edge of the sort of mainstream. So the new up and coming trends, and taking advantage of those to sort of drive through, especially with new products and innovation. I think with more mainstream brands, of course, you're trying to tap into things like health and well-being, which obviously is a huge drive from all sorts of socio-demographic, governmental, etc. reasons. And no one would you'd have to have your head in the sand to not see health and well-being sort of as a huge trend around you. But equally, when we're sort of working on more innovative work, we're really looking at some of the sort of up and coming trends that perhaps aren't so obvious to the sort of general population.
And I think there's a lot of the brand companies out there that look to us to do that for them. So they don't have that capability internally, so they look to us for guidance in terms of saying 2 years down the line, 5 years down the line, 10 years, what are we looking at? What's the landscape out there, and how do we take advantage of that? But then, so we're ahead of the game, but it's not necessarily all done by us individuals. It's looking in the right places to get that, to bring it to them in the right way. The other part that's interesting is that I think where we are ahead of the game is a lot of the clients that we deal with aren't necessarily as up to speed in terms of social media, how to use that. And given that we are kind of play a brand guardian role for them, is that how do they best exploit that social media and use it to the advantage of the brand? And I think that's the hard bit that could be easy to get wrong, and that's what we really help them shape and determine in terms of getting it right. Because it's a minefield out there. So if they don't know what they're doing and don't know how best to use it, then could be quite easy spending 20s of thousands, but in the wrong way, which would be dead money.
How do you find these trends? Do you all hang out in ruthlessly trendy wine bars?
Well, Mum does.
Right. How do you spot these things around the corner before anyone else sees them?
Well, I don't. I mean, I hope to think that we come up with some interesting insight. At the end of the day, we spend so much of our time just tracking the consumer, having your finger on the consumer pulse, and we have all sorts of methods to make sure that continues to be part of our beat. I mean, we have people that we send money to people that we know all over the world to buy things and say, look, spend £50 in this particular city on things that you think are interesting and cool, and they come back. So we have a trend watch thing, so we kind of constantly get feedback of stuff coming. We do so many consumer test groups that we're often giving any age group a camera, just video the day in the life of your daughter, or video the day in the life of yourself, or your whatever it is, and just let us know how you're living your lives. And it's usually through that kind of media that you just start to see, oh well, I wasn't expecting them to do that, or it's quite interesting that they said they would buy that, but they're actually buying that. Innovation is a given, having great insight and somebody running that side is a given. But the whole entrepreneurial side of it, what you do with it, is sort of that's the hard bit. I think that, we struggle with things like, with the Apple customer, I want to be unique, but I want to be in a room full of other unique people just like me. That's the contradictory world that we live in. And so finding the insight that kind of understands that type of consumer and what's going to appeal to them, it's very, very complicated, which is why it's a lot harder for us than it ever used to be, because you just have to make sure that you've got so many more bases covered, whether it's using semiotics, whether it's using ethnography. You just, unfortunately, it has to be part of your process.
The same tools get you the same outcomes. Unfortunately, so many people are using the same tools, it becomes sort of like the common denominator amongst many agencies. Sure. And it's just about cutting through that. Yeah,
and that's why I feel again for us, that's why it's absolutely critical for us to have both intellectual ability and creative ability, because both of those things, if you put those things together, you get a cognitive dissonance. So having intelligent people that understand logistics, understand the whole way something works and the way that consumers are working, and then having a team of creatives that then can creatively express that and in the middle having more creative planners, probably like advertising agencies, well, certainly like advertising agencies, so that you have insight, innovation, research strategy and creativity linked together with good creative thinkers who are capable of turning those insights into a brief that the creatives can understand. That's what we're trying to do as 1HQ.